So I have to tell you, when I saw the theme you chose showing up, I instantly thought about all of the women who have shown up for me throughout my lifetime. But I also thought about the times that I could have and should have shown up for other women. As was mentioned, a number of years ago, I got this great experience of going out and interviewing women for a class I was developing on women in leadership. And I found there was a lot of information about women in business and the corporate sector, but not as much about women in the public sector. So I wanted to learn their experiences. And I asked all of these women the same set of questions. And one of them was, given all the information out there about leadership, and about women in leadership in particular, what still surprised you? What caught you off guard? And as you might imagine, I heard some really amazing stories from incredible female leaders. And there were a few themes that emerged from that. But one theme that has always stuck with me, and that was the ideas that they were sharing, that they had expected women to show up for them when they were leading, and had sometimes been disappointed when they hadn't. I heard the story of a nonprofit leader in a small community who had just started her job there, and she felt like things were going pretty well. And then she heard about some other women in the community talking about her style of dress. Apparently, they thought it was a little bit too masculine and that she needed to feminize herself a little bit. I heard the story of another woman who took a position as a director in a company that had always been led by men. And she was so excited to meet some of the women that she'd be working with. But when she got there, she discovered that not only were many of them not welcoming, a few were actually hostile. And one actually said something to her, which I can't believe, along the lines of, you know, I already had a female boss once, and I'm so disappointed I got stuck with one again. Well, as you might know, many of you are maybe familiar with stories like this. And it doesn't just happen in the realm of women in leadership. It happens in our personal lives as well. I remember when my daughter started kindergarten, and I was working full-time out of the home, but I was trying to figure out how could I juggle my schedule so I could maybe go to some PTA meetings because I wanted to be invested. I mean, truly, let's admit it, I was more excited about kindergarten than she was. But I took some time one day and I went to a PTA meeting and I ended up volunteering for a committee. And afterward, the committee chair ran right over to me and she said, "Oh, I'm so excited to work with you. Last year I had to deal with one of those working mothers and you know what they're like." And you know, I'll tell you, I worked with this woman for an entire year, and I never told her that I worked outside of the home. And it's actually a decision that I regret now, but I just didn't want to hear her judgment. And it's not surprising to me that when I told people my talk today was about women showing up for women, invariably people would kind of laugh and nod their heads and go, "I know, women are so mean to each other." So I found myself asking a few questions. Why is it that we seem to be so invested in the personal decisions that other women make? And is it true? Are we really more mean to other women than men are to men? And should we do a better job showing up for other women? Well, I'm a professor of communication, so I have to dive into a lecture for 3 minutes here and tell you that one of the things I thought might answer my questions was a good old college textbook. And I use a book by Dr. Julia Woods called Communication Mosaics. And in it, she talks about human perception. How do we perceive things? And I do think there's some information in there that sheds a little bit of light on this. In perception, one of the things our brain does is it has to figure out, with all the stimuli hitting it every day, what does it choose to grab onto, and what does it choose to store? So when you think of it, there's two things, there's many, but two important things on what your brain chooses to pay attention to. We pay attention to things that matter to us, and we pay attention to things that are different. So for instance, if I went for a walk today, hopefully it's not raining yet, and I was thinking about Christmas shopping, I might find that what I'm paying attention to in downtown Rochester are the beautiful window displays that have things that I might be able to buy as a gift. But say I go for a walk next week and I forgot to eat lunch and maybe I'm a little dehydrated, my guess is I'd be paying more attention to, is there a vending machine or a restaurant somewhere? It makes sense. We pay attention to things that matter to us. But we also notice when something is different. I love the slide that Stella put up at the very beginning when you saw all the blue bubbles and the one in the middle, right? That you notice that because it's different. So our brain is storing things because it matters to us, but also we notice things that are different. But how does our brain store it? Our brain stores things in what I refer to as little pockets. They're actually called perceptual schema. I think pockets is easier to remember. And a pocket or a schema is a representation you have in your brain for something. So think about it. In all likelihood, one of the first little schemas or pockets we develop is for a mom, right? So let's say you grow up in a household and your mom doesn't work outside of the home and she does the cooking and the cleaning and she's the one that puts the Band-Aid on your knee when you fall. And every night she climbs up onto bed with you and reads a book and tucks you in. But just across the street from you, there's another child your age, and that mom and her partner work outside of the home. They both share the cooking, the cleaning, the lawn work, but that mom also puts a Band-Aid on your owie and also tucks you in with a story at night. Do you see how they form a little schema, a pocket of mom that has some things that are really similar? Nurturing, shelter, love, but also some things that are just slightly different from each other. So just like Andrea's thumbprint, all of us have a schema in our head for a mom that's slightly different, maybe similar, but slightly different based on your own experiences. But we have schemas for millions of things. What's a mom? What's a dad? What's it mean to be female? What's it mean to be a leader? We have schemas for tangible things like what's furniture and what is weather, but really abstract things like what is freedom and what is love. And those schemas are all uniquely different to each of us, even though there are some similarities. So do you see how we might pay more attention to someone that makes a choice when it's different than ours? Doesn't that make sense? That's what we notice. So I started thinking about the stories that these female leaders had told me. And I thought, isn't it interesting that what they remember first are the stories of when women didn't show up for them, and not the times when women did. We'll come back to that. I then thought about this next question, are women really more mean to each other than men are to men? And there's a lot of statistics that would show absolutely not. But there is some information that's interesting to me that shows that during interpersonal conflict, men are more likely to be physically aggressive, and women might be more likely to be relationally aggressive. In other words, a punch to the face or a punch to the heart, right? And many of us think that by nature, women are more collaborative and better team players, and that men are more competitive and more individualistic. But I want you to really think about the people in your lives. I know dozens of men who are highly collaborative and awesome team players who I love to work with. And I know dozens of women who are really competitive. I mean, if you're going to play, you might as well win. Ask anyone who's run for public office. The goal isn't to end up in a tie, right? And these are also lovely women. But I think that we perpetuate some of these stereotypes. The challenge is that for women who are competitive, we notice it because we have a prototype for women that says that they shouldn't be. So it stands out to us when they are. So I want to think about the times when women do show up for each other. And I'll share in my own life. I think about a time when my girls were pretty young and my mother-in-law was dying of cancer. My husband was traveling. It's such a crazy time. And any of you who have been through a situation like that know it's highly stressful. And I came home one day and my sister was literally sitting on the back doorstep. And she said to me, I think she could tell I was kind of losing it, right? And she said, Beth, I just want you to know, for the next couple weeks, I'm going to come to your house a couple nights a week, just sit with the girls when they do their homework and help with dinner and give you a little bit of space. I didn't ask her to do that. She just showed up. I think about a time early in my career when I was really struggling with the decision, do I want to get a PhD or don't I? And I just could not figure out how that was going to fit into my world. But the next day, my assistant director walked in and she said, Beth, I thought about this all night, and here's how we're going to do it. And she had an entire plan on how we were going to rejuggle the workload, and no doubt her taking on more of it, so I could pursue that if I wanted. Now, ultimately, I decided not to do that, but do you see her language? Here's what we're going to do. We all need a coworker like that. I also think about a time, a number of years ago, I had to have cervical surgery, and I had one of those really sexy collars on for a while, and I was not allowed to drive for 3 months. For 3 months, you can't drive. It gives you just cabin fever thinking about it, doesn't it? But I had a friend, Anna Rosé, who happens to be in the room right now, who said, "Oh, I'll just pick you up and take you to work." And there were a group of people, mostly led by Anna, who picked me up and drove me not to Oakland University in Rochester, but to the Oakland University campus in Macomb County for 3 months. I didn't ask them to do that. They just showed up. So what's my point? I think my point is that, are women really more mean to each other? I think there's lots of evidence that we're highly supportive of each other, but we pay more attention to it when someone makes a choice different than ours, because it's different, and that's what our brain does. So originally today, I thought I would come and say, we need to do a better job showing up for one another. But as often the case in teaching and learning, the more you dive into it, the more you get dissonance in your brain, because you realize, wait, what am I asking people to do? Because in the world I live in, women are showing up for each other every day, and they're doing an amazing job. Thank you.